It's such a joy to be here. I love Larry. We've become really good friends, and we did bump into each other in Dallas, and I don't know how it came about, but something about the way Larry thinks made me think, Larry, we should sort of combine forces, and we need to plan, we need to plot, we need to do that. And many people in the conservative world or in the Christian world, they kind of talk that game, but the reality is they're building their brand. Now, there's nothing wrong with building your brand, Larry, and we were talking about this before, because you have to eat. I live in Manhattan, where rent is high. I'm a writer. I own nothing. Actually, that's not true. I own a 2012 Chevy Tahoe. Praise the Lord. But the fact of the matter is, we're in a war, folks. And when you're in a war, yeah, you want to eat and you want to live your life, but we are in a war. And tomorrow, you might not have access to whatever money you've been saving. Tomorrow, I'm not speaking hyperbolically, so really suck on this, okay? Because this is not hyperbole. We have been so blessed in this country that we have no idea what evil could come tomorrow, 6 months from now. And I'm here to let you know that you need to hear it from somebody that the way we've been living in this country is unbelievably abnormal. The liberty and blessings we've had in America are preposterously abnormal. They are a ridiculous blessing from God, which by definition we do not deserve. And that's right. So I just want to tell you, I've just said this many times, but imagine if somebody says to you, like, we're in an all-out war, and we need to spend every penny you have to arm the people to fight. And you say, well, no, I'm not ready to do that. I'll give you, 30% of what I could. Well, that's a judgment call. But tomorrow, if you lose the war because you didn't give 50%, the people are going to come and take all of your money. You're going to lose. We are there in America today. Now, there's money, but there's everything else that we have. The freedom that you have, if you do not spend it all now, it will be too late. The story of Bonhoeffer and what happened to Germany in the 30s is the classic example of this. It happened in Germany. My mother grew up in Nazi Germany, so this is not some mythical thing. We're not talking about Charlemagne or what. We're talking about something that happened in the living memory of my mother. I could call her up right now. And honestly, we need in America to understand that what we have here is not normal. Evil can come. My mom and dad, maybe I'll talk about this later in the weekend, but my father grew up in Greece. My mother I think you knew that from the music, right? My mother grew up in Germany, and they met in an English class in New York City. They both came over on boats. They both passed the Statue of Liberty and got choked up because they know the living hell that is out there in the world, and America is this promise. Now, I grew up mostly in the 70s, but I knew that the kids that I went to school with, and they did not appreciate what I appreciated because my parents lived and breathed this. They didn't try to inculcate these values in me. It was just sort of normal. They would just tell stories of how they grew up and tell stories of my mother escaped East Germany. Germany, after her father was killed in the war, and they were not on board with Hitler or any of that stuff. But, you weren't asked if you were on board, right? You had to go in the war. So my grandfather managed to stay out of the war until 1943, which is astonishing. But he managed to stay out of the war, but then he had to go in. He was killed in 1944. After the war, the Soviets took over that part of Germany, so it became East Germany. So my mother was then subjected to Stalin's Soviet propaganda in high school. So she lived this, right? And, and again, if you want a little lesson, I'm talking mostly conservative, so you're not stupid and naive the way liberals are when it comes to evil. But what did the Soviets do? We said we're going to divide Germany into four spots, right? 4 different things. So we're going to get the French and the German. We all blessed the Germans, but what did the Soviets do? Because they hate God, they hate freedom, they are all about power. And since we don't have a ton of time, let me just tell you, that is the definition of evil. There are no principles except power. They will do anything, torture anyone, murder anyone, do anything they need to do. So what do the Soviets do the moment they can? They just take it. And East Germany now becomes part of the Soviet bloc. So my mother escaped that at age 17, alone. She escaped it. And, when you're a kid and you hear 17, it's like, well, 17. Now that I'm in my late 50s, at 17, she did that. My parents paid a price to leave where they were to come to the greatest nation in the history of the world, literally. And they didn't need to do much to convince me that this was the greatest nation in the history of the world. We didn't have to have patriotic parties. It just flows out of, it's called reality. It's kind of like talking about, the economics of the, it's just reality. So when you know the satanic evil that's practiced around the world and how people are crushed and oppressed, you have to say, well, what we have here, we don't deserve. People have literally died so that we could have this. So if we do not fight with all our might and main, with every penny, with every calorie of energy you have, with all of your time, with all the freedom that you have, if you don't spend it now, it will probably go away, because this is not normal. We've had this way too long. We've been living on fumes for decades. You'll hear some of this maybe from Sam Sorbo. She's a one-trick pony. It's all she talks about. It's sad. I say that in love. But honestly, we are unappreciative of what we have because we have been so blessed. And I believe, in part, what's happening now in America is the Lord giving us a chance to wake up. I believe it's God's mercy, because I don't believe God will remove his hand from America so easily. I actually think that he gives us the story of Bonhoeffer as a warning to the American church. I want to tell you a little bit how I came to write the book, and then I want to tell you the parallels that I see today. But the book, I never wanted to write a biography. I always wanted to be a writer, but I never wanted to write a biography. And the Lord, I won't go into it, but rather miraculously guided me. And I don't use those terms lightly. I believe in miracles. I'm crazy enough to believe that Jesus rose from the dead bodily. I know most of you don't believe that because you're liberal mainline Protestants. But the point is, I also believe God parted the Red Sea. It's not a metaphor. He parted the Red Sea. Now, that God is alive. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is alive. He's eternal. He's outside of time. We sometimes forget he's alive. He's as alive now as he was before he created the universe. He's as alive as he was when he parted the Red Sea. You need to pray to that God. You need to know that God, because we're living at a time when genuinely apart from him, we can talk about all kinds of principles, but apart from him, America is dead. I believe that. And I believe he's allowed us to experience a kind of a Good Friday in America. There's a great campaign slogan, not Morning in America. Hey, it's Good Friday in America. We're dead. But God, who is life itself, if he chooses, can raise America from the dead. But I honestly believe he's allowed us to go through this time. Now, I say I never wanted to write a biography. That's true. The Lord miraculously led me. The Bonhoeffer book is particularly strange because, and again, I won't go into most of this, but it was an exceedingly difficult trial for me. It was a horrible time in my life. Writing the book was very, very painful. I just won't go into the details because they're not that important, but publishing the book was hell on earth. The publisher, when I handed in the manuscript, insisted that I cut it roughly in half because nobody's going to buy a huge book on a German theologian. Look, he's a publisher. They know their business. So I was being sarcastic. I know I'm in Birmingham, but you've watched enough TV and you understand sarcasm. But common sense, and this is why you have to be on your guard against common sense. There's a time, common sense, worldly wisdom, natural thinking is a good thing. But you have the discernment of God to know when it's not. And I'm just here to tell you that I knew when I wrote that book it was supposed to be what it was. And if somebody says cut it, you say, well, cut what? Where's the fat? I mean, I see bone and I see flesh. I don't see fat. I'm a writer. I'm not the kind of guy that throws you 1,200 pages and says, can you get a book out of it? I know, I care about the syllables. So bottom line, the publisher put me through hell, delayed publication. If I'm struggling financially now to live in New York and being a writer and living, it's not easy, but then I was dependent on that book coming out. And so the publisher really, I tell the story actually in my Miracles book. I don't think there are copies here, but I kind of tell the story. It's a long, painful story. But the reason I tell it is because the Lord actually spoke to me in a dream. I'm not going to tell you the details, but honestly, there are miracles. I've experienced real miracles. I mean, if you ever had a dream, like a really Baroque, detailed dream, and then it comes true exactly the next day, that's a miracle. You're not supposed to be able to see the future. Did you know that? Yeah. Did you know that? You didn't know that. Only God, who's outside of time, can pull that stuff off. But the point is that I've had a few of those things happen to me, in the past. And if that troubles your theology, that's probably why you're here. So, but the Lord, in this miracle, effectively made it clear to me that His hand was on this book. And God, I don't know, actually now I'm curious because since I brought it up, how many of you have experienced an out-and-out like miracle? Anybody daring enough to raise your hands? All right, who believes these people? Come on. That's the past. That doesn't happen anymore. I got you. Okay, so I have. No question about it. No question about it. And all I can tell you is that God made it clear to me He had His hand on this book somehow. But the agony continued. Finally, it got published. But it was so painful. And the Lord sometimes will do a miracle to communicate to you something that you need. And I needed that miraculous word from God to continue writing this book, to get it. I had to switch publishers. It was awful. But what happened? What happened is I switched publishers. And the publisher I took the book to, I said to the first publisher, no, I'm sorry, you forfeited the right to publish this book. I'm going to take it someplace, somebody who appreciates it a little bit. And so Thomas Nelson published it. And what happened to the 600-page book on the German theologian? It sold 1 million copies. That's not supposed to happen. And I got to tell you, the writing quality in every one of my books is exactly the same as it is in the Bonhoeffer book. But when a book sells 1 million copies, it tells you something. One of the things it told me is that this story, forget about my writing, but this story, if told correctly, and in most Bonhoeffer books, frankly, it's not told correctly. It's just sort of larded over with, some people know how to tell a story and some people don't. And a lot of times academics will tell a story and it's just not, it doesn't come across, or they'll focus on a certain thing or they'll leave things out. I wanted to tell the story the way I knew the story, and I did. And so it sold all these copies, and everybody would say the same thing. Wow, this is what's happening now. Now, I didn't write the book to tell people what's happening now. I wrote the book to tell the biography of this hero of the faith, a man who, because of his faith in Jesus, spoke up for the Jews, spoke against Hitler. Staggering story. When I first heard it, when I first came to faith, I thought, that's the kind of Christianity I could believe in. I just wanted to tell this story, but everybody kind of came and kept saying this. But when I was writing it, I could smell this too. I thought, this is weirdly prescient, it felt to me. And so it sold 1 million copies because it struck a nerve. And it was translated eventually into 20 different languages. And by God's grace, it will soon be translated back into English so that we can read it again. Praise the Lord. Yeah, I can't wait for that. So, but I thought, why is this? It's because this is a unique story. I didn't make it up. I didn't make up anything. I didn't do much. You just tell the story, right, as it's meant to be told. And it's inspiring. Why? Because Bonhoeffer kicks butt? No. He dies. But why is he triumphant? Why do we weep at this hero giving his life? Because there's so much in this story that I just had the privilege to tell. But the more time has passed since I wrote it, it came out in 2010, the more horrifying it's been to watch as what happens in the book is happening, right? And I say this because ultimately, to me, it's God giving us a chance and saying, okay, this is what happened here. And since so many people have bought the book and read it, this is a warning to you that what happened here in Germany is exactly what will happen to you, and why shouldn't it, unless you're a racist who thinks the Germans are uniquely evil. But if you understand that you have as much original sin as they do, you understand this should happen here. But I believe it's God's mercy to say, but it doesn't need to, because you have this example, and you could possibly avert this. And that's the hope that I have, and I believe that. It's why I'm here talking about it. But strangely, of course, in the last 4 years, I've gotten innumerable emails from people saying, Eric, you're so stupid. Don't you understand the meaning of your own book? Don't you see that Trump is the authoritarian that Hitler was? How could you miss that? You wrote the book. And I have no answer to that. So the lessons that I get from Bonhoeffer ultimately are the following. There are a couple of things. First of all, Chuck Colson popularized the idea of the spiral of silence. Now, he stole this from some German sociologist writing about the 1930s, but the spiral of silence is the idea that if you shut up today, you make it much tougher for somebody else to speak up because they're looking around, their fingers in the wind. Can I say anything? Should I be quiet? In Germany, because everybody knows, the Germans follow rules, their order, right? People had a huge window to speak the truth and to fight National Socialist doctrine. But they said, not yet. I want to keep my powder dry. I want to preach the gospel. I don't want to get political. I'm not kidding, okay? This is what happened. This is good German Christians. I'm not talking about evil people. I'm talking about good people who believe mostly what we believe. You need those people to do real evil. You just need a handful of truly evil people. But if everybody else goes along, if you can persuade them to shut up for 5 more minutes, shut up, wear your mask, keep your mouth shut, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. Now, it's an interesting thing, because you'd think that in America we have been trained to say, excuse me? What? You're going to tell me what I'm going to talk about? I don't think so. No, we're free. But something has happened over the last 50 years, and we have lost the connection to the roots of our common sense of freedom that we once had. It's not been taught in the schools. I don't need to tell you that in America, really roughly since the 60s, I mean, it goes way before that in, the intellectual roots, but it really comes to flower in the 60s, and suddenly, the youth are put above the people with the gray hair. They know everything, which is a Rousseauian stupidity, right? It's this idea that the young are untainted and the old people are corrupt. It's just the opposite of what every culture since the beginning of time has taught, okay? You don't need to go to America. Every culture, you go to any culture in the world, they have always said the old ones are wise and the kids are stupid, so shut up and listen to your elders because they know stuff, you know nothing, right? Well, that's common sense, but something happened in the 60s, and many things happened, and we threw away all the stuff we seemed to know, or at least we ceased teaching the things we once knew. And so for some time now, we have ceased to raise, what can I say, manly men, for example. We don't talk about that so much. Be a man. We don't say that. That might offend somebody. We've ceased to talk about what it is to be an American, because that might offend somebody who's not from America. We don't want to say God bless America. I mean, we've all heard this nonsense. If you're in Birmingham, you've heard it way less than I have in New York, and I had the misfortune of going to Yale University, where you kind of, it's like you take the gas pipe of this garbage there, for 4 years. And how many people too young to get the gas pipe reference? Excellent. So, but I'm also too young to get that reference. So, but the fact of the matter is that all of that stuff, it's taken decades for us to be slow to react. So when somebody says, you can't talk about that or that or that, previous generations would say, what? No. We fought several wars to, like, you must be crazy. But somehow today, we go, okay, that's interesting. Now, that's where Germany was. Germany, I don't need to go into it, but Chuck Colson talks about the spiral of silence, and he says, and this thing works both ways. It's just a part of how humans interact, that if you say something loud and proud, right? The gay rights folks figured this out. It's like, don't be ashamed. Come out to your parents. Be loud and proud. Why? Because when you do that, it normalizes it, and everybody goes, oh, I didn't know. Yeah, everybody's saying they're gay. It must be a good thing. People don't need to think it through. They just hear stuff, right? But then if you don't talk about it, it's the same thing. So in Germany, in 1933, if you didn't say Heil Hitler loudly, you might get away with that. But if you didn't say it in 1934 or 35, it got tougher every year because more and more people drank the Kool-Aid and went along with this. So Chuck Colson calls it the spiral of silence. In other words, you could speak up now, but tomorrow, maybe not. Day after tomorrow, definitely not. So what would you do if you knew that in advance, which we should? You'd scream now. You'd spend it all now. So this is a theme, okay? Whether it's money, freedom, your voice, whatever it is, you need now. It's now, because tomorrow, it's gone. It's gone. So in Germany, this actually happened. So the Bonhoeffer story, which I hope you'll read, and if you don't have time to read the book, at least buy a few copies, all right? But it happened in Germany that people said, you know what, I don't want to lose my job. My neighbors might suspect me of something, so I'll just keep my mouth shut a little bit. Now, of course, when you're doing that, what you're doing, we're seeing it now in the cancel culture, if you keep your mouth shut, you're letting the person who opens his mouth take all the heat. Cancel that guy. Boom, he's gone. Whew, glad it wasn't me. Well, some of you are familiar with the famous Martin Niemoller poem. It's not much of a poem, but it's in the Bonhoeffer book. Martin Niemoller was a friend of Bonhoeffer's. He was older. He was the pastor of an extraordinary church. He had a military background, real hero. He was initially fooled by the Nazis enough that he didn't say anything. And when he finally woke up to what was going on, boom, it was too late. There was nothing he could do. As soon as he opened his mouth up, Hitler had him arrested. He got out a year later. He was rearrested, and he was Hitler's personal prisoner, so to speak. You know, we don't need laws. You can be my personal prisoner, and you're going into the concentration camp until the end of the war. But he wrote a poem about this, and some of you know it. It starts out, first they came for the communists, but I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I didn't speak out. I was not a Jew. And then when they came for me, there was no one left to speak out for me. It's over. That's what happens. That's how it happens. That's what the cancel culture is doing now. It's picking people off. And so we have a choice. Either I can be one of the ones who speaks out now and has people look at him funny, or I could be one of the ones that stands with the people who are being canceled, or I can just slink into the shadows and say, they're canceling Mike Lindell, but you know what, I kind of don't like him, I don't care. They canceled Eric Metaxas. He was knocked off of YouTube, 220,000 subscribers. That was being monetized, major way that I pay my rent, pay my daughter's tuition. Wiped out from YouTube. Why? Well, because we violated their community standards, right? How? Tell me how. Were we using obscenities, pornography? What was it? Well, we were talking about the things that they said we shouldn't talk about. Really, really evil things like whether it's good to take the vaccine. You don't want to bring that up at a time. People could die if you even bring that up. We don't want to have rational discussions about that. Now, keep in mind, folks, you don't have to agree with somebody. You just have to understand that in America, people have died for your right to speak truth, to speak your stupid opinion, whatever it is. People died so that you don't have to worry. You can just speak, and people can say, well, that's interesting, or I disagree with that. That's America. People died for that. But we've forgotten about that in America. So suddenly, a few years ago, people said, well, you can't say that. You can't say that. Now, I saw this happening at Yale in the early 80s when I was there. I had come out of a working-class European background. My parents, taught me to love my country and whatever. They weren't like ideologues, but it was kind of basic American values, right? And I went to church on Sunday. We weren't particularly religious, but, the basics. Well, I got to Yale, and I got a whole different view. The cultural elites, the global view, the anti-American view was all there. But I didn't really know what I believed exactly. And so I kind of thought, oh, my parents didn't get to go to college, and maybe this is what the elites believe, and maybe they're right. They're probably right. So I kind of drifted with that. I didn't really drink the Kool-Aid, but I drank it enough that I certainly didn't know what I now know. I was just kind of, open-minded. And if you go to a place like that, it's really important not to go in open-minded. It's kind of a key thing. Because they will tell you what to think. And I was told, no, you can't say Oriental. It's Asian. I was like, oh, I don't know who decided that, but okay, right? I don't know that. My parents didn't know that. They would say Oriental. My grandmother would say colored people. Well, is my grandmother a racist? No. But, you grow up in a certain place and, you try to say, so I went to Yale, now I'm among the elites. So now we use this word, this word, this word, this word. These are the words we use. That's how it starts, right? Suddenly, we were told that being gay was a wonderful thing. I always thought that it was a sad thing or a weird thing or a physically impossible thing. And yet, I was told these different things. But it started there. That's the elite institution. It trickles down into the culture so that in America, suddenly, you're told that if you have a biblical view of sexuality, you're a bigot. Now, this is not about Christians. Every serious Jew, every serious Muslim, every serious Christian, and all kinds of other people have what we would call roughly a biblical view of sexuality. It's not just the crazy evangelicals, right? But you're now being told, no, you can't say that. Now, this is where old-style Americans would tip over cars, would throw tea in the harbor, and would say, how dare you even think about telling me what I can and cannot say? Go back where you came from, because we don't do that in America. But something happened to us where we sort of accepted these things. It's more stunning, really, that Christians would accept it or would be silenced, because you don't even need to accept it, but just to be silenced it's an amazing thing. Say, don't say that because you're going to offend. We all know this stuff, right? But the point is, this is what has happened in our culture. But don't feel bad, because it happened in Germany. The exact same thing happened in Germany. It was a Christian nation, okay? I would say roughly as Christian as America has been. I don't mean Gentile. I mean Christian. I mean, there were a lot of serious Christians, and then there were a lot of, dead Gentiles pretending to be Christians. These are the people that, well, I'm not a Jew, I'm not an atheist, I guess I'm a Christian, right? There's a lot of that. But what I'm saying is that this was not a country of anti-Semites any more than England was a country of anti-Semitism has been everywhere. But the point is that they did not know what they really believed. In other words, when you really pushed them, like, is this really what the Bible says? They were not biblically that literate. There were some, but many of them just thought, well, I don't know. If the Nazis are pushing this hard, maybe we were wrong, right? You have to know what you believe. I didn't know what I believed at Yale. I got pushed around, and only by the grace of God did I eventually see the truth. The Germans got pushed around. They didn't know how to respond quickly enough. But Bonhoeffer was trying, like an Old Testament prophet, to speak principally to the church, because I mentioned Martin Niemoller. The church was the one institution in the culture of Germany that had the power to stand up against National Socialist ideology. They had that ability. So Bonhoeffer knew, if they don't stand up, we're dead. And that's often the case. I would roughly say the same about the church in America today. But when he said to them, as the Old Testament's prophets did, they basically said to the people of God, you need to actually be the people of God, okay? It's not enough being Jewish. You have to live as though you fear the God of the Jews, and you have to live for him. And in Germany, Bonhoeffer saying to the church, no, you need to actually be the church now. We talk about dying for our faith. People have died for their faith. We need to kind of behave like that now. And most of the people there sort of, dulled to the lives that they had led and the businesses that they had and just the general blessings that they had. They thought, well, not yet. The hotheads can speak up now, but I'm not yet. And the less they spoke up, the more the spiral of silence spirals. And it became tougher and tougher. And Bonhoeffer tried to wake them up in effectively saying, you have a window. If you do not act now, it will be over. C.L. said it before, like if America goes away, there's no, America light waiting in the wings. This is not like that kind of a free market situation. There's nothing. It's the end. Because we have held the torch of liberty high for centuries, certainly for the last century. People like my parents have looked to this nation as the great hope where they could raise their kids, even though they have thick accents and no education. They could work hard and their kids could go to college maybe and buy a house and have a good life and a free life where they're not told what to think. That's what we have been. And so if we go away, I wrote a book called If You Can Keep It, because Franklin saw this about the nature of American liberty. If we, the people, do not keep the republic, it just goes away. You can't say, well, here's the Constitution, it keeps itself. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's not an algorithm that it just takes care of itself. We, the people, have to understand how it works, and we have to live it out in our lives. And we have to live freely. We have to spend our freedom. And I would say this is a fundamentally biblical idea, okay? In Genesis, it talks about the notion that goes all through Scripture, we are blessed to be a blessing. Why does God bless you? Well, he loves you. But he loves those who are not blessed also. You are blessed particularly to be a blessing. Just as the Jews are chosen for the sake of all the nations beyond Israel. It's a particular burden when God chooses you. It's a particular burden when God blesses you, because he blesses you to be a blessing. He gives you these gifts so that you can use these gifts and steward these gifts for those who don't have those gifts. So if we in America live gloriously freely, and we take advantage of the free market to build wealth, we can bless other nations, which we've been doing for a couple of centuries. We go there and help when there's an earthquake or a tsunami or whatever it is. We have done that. We have sent missionaries around the world to bring not just the gospel of Jesus Christ, but all that comes with that. Women are elevated. In India, Wilberforce said, you know what? In India, they burn the widow alive on the pyre of her dead husband. We're not gonna stand for that. Well, some people said, well, they have customs. That's their custom. And Wilberforce and some English said, well, we have a custom. We hang the people who do that. The idea that we would apologize for bringing those beautiful ideas about the dignity of all human beings into other parts of the world is so idiotic. Can you imagine? We have blessed the whole world with biblical ideas. With the free market. We have blessed the world in all kinds of ways. If this torch goes out, that's it, folks. It's over. So we have a particular burden to be a blessing. We've been blessed to be a blessing, but we're just about to lose. It's as if we've been blessed and we blew the money, the way the prodigal son does. Instead of using it for God's purposes, we've sort of wasted it on ourselves, or we didn't appreciate it, and suddenly it was gone. And then there's nothing. I really believe, folks, that that's where we are today. And when you look at the story of Germany, I just have to tell you, let's think for a moment, what is the opposite of cancel culture, right? Now, cancel culture, I don't want to, unwind the whole thing, but what it is a Marxist idea that is anti-God, therefore anti-grace. It's anti-agape love. Instead of, you said this evil thing on Twitter 49 years ago before Twitter was invented, and you need to die and lose your life and career, right? Well, Christians theoretically say, you know what? God can forgive you of the ugliest thing you did, murder, a bad tweet. God loves you. He wants to forgive you. Remember that idea of forgiving people of what they tweeted? Can you imagine? Well, cancel culture is precisely the opposite. It's a satanic idea to find some sin and to go, ha-ha. Now, our response should be, ha-ha, what? I already gave that to Jesus. He forgave me, and I'm good. He knows about it. I know about it. So what's the big deal? But if you don't have a biblical worldview, you buy into the cancel culture. And Christians have bought into the cancel culture to some extent. Again, I don't want to go into that. But the concept of it is that we allow someone, bing, to be taken out. What's the opposite of that? The opposite of that, it's like speaking loudly rather than being silent and letting that guy take the heat for speaking. We stand with those who are canceled. When my friend Mike Lindell was canceled by the big box stores for daring to spend millions of his own money to try to clarify what happened in this election, which I'm pretty convinced was stolen. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Who are we to judge? But the point is that in America, we are supposed to be free to have any idea you want. I can believe any stupid thing, any wrong thing. This is America. We're free in America. So here you have a man earnestly using his own millions to do something as patriotic as anyone has ever done. The best thing that could come out of it was he discovers, I was totally wrong. That would be nice, but you've got to look into it. You've got to see the evidence, right? Well, because he dared to do this, all of these big box stores said, we're going to cancel him. So Bed Bath & Beyond, all of these cowards who I'm convinced would joyfully build the ovens to burn the Jews to increase their bottom line because they have no values, folks. They have no principles except the bottom line. They're just going to go the way the wind goes. Which way is the wind blowing? You tell me. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So Mike Lindell's bad, Biden good, can't talk about this, can't talk about that. So we're going to cancel him. So all the big box stores, Bed Bath & Beyond and all the others, canceled Mike Lindell and said, we're not going to sell your evil stuff, your evil pillows in our stores. Now I think to myself, there's some comedy in this, right? Like, can you imagine the level of arbitrariness of this? That they're singling him out. Think of all of the SOBs selling crap across America. Really wicked people. Nobody ever mentions or thinks about that. But Mike Lindell, he's really bad because he's friends with Trump. And so they decided to cancel him. And I thought to myself, what we need to do in America, which they didn't do in Germany, is anytime anybody's canceled, doesn't matter if you agree with them. It could be Naomi Wolf, my classmate at Yale, total liberal, feminist, but she has spoken out about the vaccine passports, right? There are some brave liberals out there talking about these things. And I got to tell you, when these people are canceled, Twitter wiped her out, YouTube wiped me out, they're canceling Mike Lindell, and you can think of all the people. We need en masse to rise up and leap to their defense. Buy pillows you don't need, give them to the homeless. Because we need to send a signal to the people doing the canceling that if you want to play that game, there's two sides to that story. Because I really do think that when people do that, the only thing you can do is stand with them. Does not mean you agree with them. Doesn't matter. It's the principle. There's nothing more evil, anti-biblical, anti-American than this idea of canceling people because they don't toe the line. It's no different than the guy who says, I'm not so sure about Hitler, I'm not so sure about Stalin, and they disappear. Why? Because in those cultures, that's what happens to people who aren't careful, who say things they shouldn't say. Solzhenitsyn cracked a mild joke about Stalin in a letter to a friend. He believed in Soviet communism. But for that joke, he was sent to the gulag. That's what they do in those countries. They don't believe in God. They hate the idea of God because it threatens them. Any idea of truth, objective truth, very threatening to anybody who is clinging to power. Well, to see that come into America, you have to understand it is clearly anti-biblical. clearly anti-biblical. It doesn't matter who they're canceling or what. But all of this stuff we're seeing happening, I don't want to forget to say that recently, this really took my breath away. I mentioned that YouTube canceled me. Devastating, but I praise the Lord in all circumstances because, all things do work together for good for those that love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. Like, we're supposed to actually believe that. It's not a nice idea. It's not a Hallmark idea, right? So you give it to Jesus and you say, Lord, whatever. I don't deserve to breathe. I don't deserve to live in this great country. Lord, use me for your glory. And we rejoice in Him always. But I was taken aback when, 3 weeks ago, something like that, I get an email from my publisher. I have a book coming out in the fall called Is Atheism Dead? I'm really, really excited about this book and proud of this book. It's apologetics. It's all about, it's not really particularly Christian. It just sort of shows how science is proving God. And most of us in the room, I'm sure you don't know about this. I've discovered some of this stuff, and I thought, I got to write about this. People need to know the evidence from science for a creator God is becoming like really crazy, where atheists they've got to be sweating because it's over. It is over. So, and then there's a lot of stuff, biblical archaeology and all kinds of stuff and arguments against atheism. But anyway, the point is that the book's coming out in October, and I just found out that a Christian book distributor, a huge thing, some of you heard of it, called Parable, which oversees, they're affiliated with 150 specifically Christian independent bookstores. They have kind of new leadership, younger leadership, less wise leadership. And they decided, because they got a couple of nasty letters from some bookstores, I don't know how many, 2, 5, I don't know. They decided they will not promote my book because I am too controversial. Now, I thought to myself, the book has nothing political in it. I'm just telling you this because this is where we are now. This is a distinctly evangelical Christian company that decided to cancel me because I dared to what? Vote for the anti-abortion guy? What did I do wrong? Say that I love America? But I want you to know this, and part of my saying this is to practice what I preach, that we need to push back. That when somebody pulls that, I'm going to say, okay, you want to pull that? Every time I'm on TV or radio, I'm going to talk about what Parable did. Because this is particularly foul. And because those folks need to know, and unless we do this, they won't know. But they need to know that if you do that, there are other people who are going to treat you differently. In other words, you can't just get away with it. It's not a one-way street. If you cancel Mike Lindell, everybody that I know is going to write an email to those stores that they shop in and that they spend a lot of money in Bed Bath & Beyond and whatever. I can't remember the list of names. And it's going to say, you know what? Because of what you did, I am not going to shop there. I'm going to drive 5 miles out of my way to that other store because what you did is wrong. And until you change that, I'm going to do that. You send them a few emails. Folks, if just we in this room did that, they would lose it. They can't handle that. They'd be like, what? What? Like those crazy, the pro-Trump people actually spend money in our store? Really? Wow, we better be careful. As far as they're concerned, they're totally taking you for granted. And why shouldn't they take you for granted? Because you're not doing anything about it. Well, we need to do something about it. Whenever anybody is canceled or treated like that, we need to do, look, Niemoller said it. When they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up because I was not a Jew. When they came for the, folks, when they came for anybody, when they come for anybody, in the principle, you need to stand with those people, even people who are your enemies. You stand with them. You remember the ACLU, before they became the ACLU of today, in the 80s, they defended neo-Nazis who were marching through the streets of the Chicago suburbs, Skokie, Illinois, which they knew there were a lot of older Jewish population there, and the neo-Nazis were going to march there. Now, of course, everybody knows that's wrong, that's evil, but the ACLU said, yes, but in America, we have to defend even those bums. And we will defend even them because there's a principle underneath it. We don't agree with their loony ideology. But in America, we have to allow even for that loony ideology. Think how far we've come today, folks. We basically say in America, we won't defend anything. If you say anything that has a whiff of controversy, boom, you're out. That's happened in a few decades in America. Didn't we all used to say that, I disagree with you, but I'll defend to the death your right to say what you said? I mean, I remember learning that as an undergraduate, hearing that. I never heard that, at the dinner table. My parents weren't familiar with these, American ideas. But I thought, yeah, that's America. That is gone. Well, we people of faith, but every patriot needs to live that way. So when you see a liberal get canceled, I don't think, I'm probably the only one that defended, it was a couple of weeks ago, Alec Baldwin. His wife was being mocked for something in the conservative media, Fox News or something like that. And I kind of looked at the situation and I said, this is stupid. I totally disagree with Alec Baldwin on 98% of the stuff, but this is stupid. We're attacking his wife. If they attacked a conservative or a Christian on the same stuff, which they do, it would be wrong. It's stupid, but it's fun. People do it. They get entertainment. We can't be a part of that. And that's just, for me, that's what it means to live out my Christian faith, is that schadenfreude isn't just something that is reserved for me. It's wrong to do that, to cancel somebody or try to take somebody down in a cheap way like that. But that is where we are. I have to say that part of this all became focused for me, I guess about a month ago. It must have been more than a month ago. The first days of June, I opened up my computer, and several websites were just exploding with rainbow colors. And I said, when did this happen? When did this happen that everybody's sort of being forced to celebrate? I mean, what? But I mean, what is that? Sodomy? Are we supposed to celebrate that? I don't understand. I'm a Christian. I believe in the Bible. If people want to do stuff behind closed doors, in America, we let people do stuff. We let people say stupid things, do things. That's America. But don't tell me to celebrate it, because I can't. But look where we've come. How many pastors spoke loudly about this? We've come to a point where they're gone, effectively. Where are the men to speak about that and to say, hey, no. You do what you want to do, but don't even imply what I need to celebrate. This is America. We don't do that. That's not right. Silence. And it has infinitely less to do with the sexuality and that agenda, to me, than it does with the enforcement of some kind of one-world secular religion. That everybody agrees with this, right? If you don't, you're weird and you need to be marginalized. So every Orthodox Jew, every serious evangelical, every serious Catholic, every serious Muslim, all of you are bigots, and you're out. You're out. It's even worse than not having the vaccine. You need to be marginalized. You need to go into a camp. You need to be separated. Folks, this is not the American way. But the bottom line is, if we don't take a lesson from the story of Bonhoeffer and say that if you do not fight now with everything you have, think of what you have. It's been given to you. You've been blessed to be a blessing. Now is the time. Tomorrow, you will not be able to be a blessing. Your hands will be tied behind your back. Your guns are gone. Your money is gone. It's over. You should have used it, but you didn't, and it's gone. We are at that point, folks. We are at that point. Now, fundamentally, I believe this is a spiritual issue. I believe God Almighty, the Lord of hosts, will act on our behalf, but He has allowed us to go through this season to wake up His church. How bad does it need to be before you will wake up? And people say, I don't want to be divisive. I don't want to be political. Well, folks, Jesus was political, okay? God is political. He believes slavery is evil, okay? There were people back then who said, I don't want to get into that. I just want to preach the gospel of Jesus. There were Germans who said, I don't want to speak up against the government and against Hitler. I don't want to be political. I just want to preach the gospel. What phony gospel do you think you're preaching when there are Jews in boxcars going to Treblinka and Auschwitz and you say nothing? What kind of dead Christian faith do you want to share with your neighbors if that's who you are? And why do you think today, when people say, I don't want to be political, why do you think you would stand up for the Jews? Why do you think you would stand against slavery? Let's be honest, folks. If you're not speaking up now, if you're not doing everything now, let's be honest, you wouldn't have spoken then because you're not speaking now. You're keeping your powder dry. You're looking around to see, is anybody else speaking up? I'm just here to say to us and anywhere I go, if we do not understand that what we have is an extraordinarily precious gift that will go away forever, and your children and grandchildren will suffer, and the poor will suffer the most, and the urban poor of color will suffer the most, if you care about them and you don't act now and speak now against all of this ridiculousness, speak against critical race theory and BLM. BLM is a Marxist organization that hates the family, that hates God, and if you are so confused and so white guilty that you are unable to muster the courage to say, that's stupid, that will harm black people, and because I'm a Christian who cares about my neighbor, that's why I condemn it. If you don't do that, and do that in your school boards and wherever you go, folks, we are going to be judged for our silence. To preach the gospel means to live the gospel. It means that I actually believe that God is alive and that he literally defeated death. That's not an idea, it's not a metaphor. Now, if he actually defeated death and we claim we believe it, we will live the way Bonhoeffer lived. He did not fear death because he knew, he didn't hope, I hope it's true. He knew it had been defeated on the cross. And if you know that, you won't fear death. And you will live utterly differently. You will live freely. You will not be afraid of anything. You won't be afraid of being canceled. You will be free. And CL just talked about that. That's what it is to be free. If you don't behave as though you're actually free, you're actually not free. You need to live in that faith, knowing that it's true. It's not a nice idea that I hope it works out. You need to live as though it's true because it's actually true. And if we alone, whoever is listening to this, would live that way tomorrow, the world would change. I believe God has given us the Bonhoeffer story and a window to avert the satanic horror of the Holocaust, whatever it will be in our generation, if we fail to do what God calls us to do, as the German church failed. And you understand they're hanging their heads in shame 80 years later. The entire nation is riven with guilt because they didn't do the right thing back then. We have an opportunity. God is real. Go get him. God bless you.